Ethan and I became friends when we were 5 years old. His family moved in next door, and my mom made me bring cookies over to say hello. He was sitting on his porch steps, looking sad about leaving his old friends. I told him he could share my friends. He said girls had cooties, so I dumped the whole plate of cookies right on his head. After that, we were stuck together like glue. For the next 13 years, we did everything as a pair. He walked me to school every day, even when other boys teased him for hanging out with a girl. I went to all his baseball games, even the ones far away that took a long bus ride. I painted his jersey number on my cheek and cheered louder than anyone in the stands. People always asked if we were dating, and we always laughed like it was a silly question. We weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. We were just Ethan and Mia, which felt like something bigger than dating. In high school, people pushed the idea even harder. His teammates told him I was in love with him. My friends said he looked at me differently than other girls. We rolled our eyes every time. We said growing up together made us like family. I knew every gross thing about him, like how he ate cheese, straight from the block at 2 in the morning. He had seen me with chicken pox, with braces, and with a terrible haircut in 10th grade. You don't fall for someone who helped you bury your pet hamster. College almost broke us apart. He went to a university for engineering. I went to an art school 40 minutes away for design. The first month was hard. I called him crying when my roommate drove me crazy, and he'd show up at midnight with soup when I got sick. We promised to have dinner together every single Sunday, no matter what. Sometimes that meant meeting at a rundown diner exactly halfway between our schools. Those Sunday dinners kept me going. In our 3rd year, everything changed. Ethan started dating a girl from his class named Claire. She was smart and kind, which somehow made it worse. For the first time in 16 years, someone else came first in his life. He still showed up for Sunday dinners, but he'd spend half the time texting her. I told myself this was fine, that I was happy for him. I started dating too. A sweet, funny guy named Ryan from my painting class. The 4 of us went on awkward double dates where everyone tried too hard. Claire kept asking how long Ethan and I had been friends, then saying how cute it was, like our friendship was a fun little show. Everything came apart in our last year of college. Claire got into a graduate program in California and wanted Ethan to move with her. She told him it was time to leave childhood things behind. The childhood thing was me. When Ethan told me this at Sunday dinner, I said he should go because Claire was wonderful and California had great jobs. He stared at me for a long time and said, "Yeah, I thought so." That night I cried so hard my roommate almost called for help. Ryan broke up with me 2 weeks later. He said I was clearly in love with someone else, and he was right, even if I hadn't admitted it to myself yet. The week before graduation, Ethan showed up at my apartment at 3 in the morning. He wasn't drunk, just wrecked. He said he had broken up with Claire because she made him choose between California and staying near me, and he couldn't choose her. I told him he was foolish for wrecking his future over a friendship. He said that was the whole problem. I wasn't just his friend, and hadn't been for years. Then he kissed me. I pulled back, shaking all over. He looked scared and hopeful at the same time. All I could ask was whether he really broke up with Claire because of me. He nodded like it was obvious. We sat on my steps, not touching, just staring at each other, my heart pounding in my ears. Eventually we went inside and sat on opposite ends of the couch, too nervous to get close. We talked all night without touching once. Ethan told me he had been in love with me since he was a sophomore in high school, back when I showed up sick with the flu to one of his games because I'd promised I would be there. He said he convinced himself it was only friendship because I never seemed interested that way. When it was my turn, I admitted Ryan had been right about me. I told Ethan I couldn't admit it was him until he kissed me that night. We talked until the sun came up and fell asleep on the couch, our feet almost touching. My roommate Nora found us like that the next morning and screamed, so loud the neighbors banged on the wall. She said everyone had been waiting for this since we were kids. Her excitement made it feel real and a little scary, because now other people knew, and there was no going back. Later, Ethan texted asking if I wanted to get coffee, like an actual date. I said yes, even though my hands shook typing it. We met at a coffee shop we'd visited 100 times before, but everything felt strange now. I kept slipping into best friend mode. Then remembering we were supposed to be something else, I spilled my coffee twice from nerves. Walking back, he took my hand, and it felt warm, familiar, and completely wrong all at once. Like we were pretending to be in someone else's relationship. A week later, things got hard. Ethan mentioned I should look for design jobs near his school after graduation. A week later, things got hard. Ethan mentioned I should look for design jobs near his school after graduation. Something in me snapped. I told him I wasn't Claire, and I wouldn't rearrange my whole life just because we were suddenly a couple. He said he just wanted us in the same city, but I could hear what he really meant, that I was supposed to be the one who moved. We had our first real fight, right there in my apartment. He left without a goodnight kiss and I felt sick. Graduation got closer and real choices had to be made. I got a job offer from a great design company 2 hours away, and I wanted it badly. Ethan got offers both nearby and in my city, and the moment I told him about my job, he said he'd take the local one, saying something about staying near his family. But I could see the truth on his face. He was already starting to regret the choice he made with Claire. And now he was about to make the same choice again, for me. I told him I needed him to want his own life, not just follow me around. At Ethan's graduation party, his sister Sophie pulled me aside. She asked if I was sure about this relationship. She said Ethan had been shaping his choices around what he thought I wanted since we were little kids, and she worried he didn't know who he was without me. Her words stuck with me the rest of the night. I thought about how at 5, he gave up his juice box because I said I didn't like the flavor. At 12, he quit chess club because I said it was boring. At 18, he turned down California for me. Sophie was right, and I didn't know how to fix it. 2 months after graduation, Ethan was working at a local engineering firm, and he clearly hated it. He'd be tired and frustrated every time I visited. One night I caught him looking at job listings in California. I asked if he regretted turning down Claire's plan. After a long pause, he admitted that sometimes he wondered. We stayed up all night talking about what we actually wanted, instead of what we thought we should want. We agreed something had to change. We decided to try long distance so Ethan could take a better job 3 hours away. The first month was rough. We had to schedule calls like strangers instead of talking whenever we wanted. I threw myself into work and started making new friends. We went to art galleries on weekends, and I realized I was having fun without him there. It felt like freedom and loss at the same time. 4 months into the long-distance stretch, we were barely talking beyond quick updates. One afternoon, my coworker Jake and I got coffee and ended up walking around the city for an hour, talking about music and art and nothing important. When I got home, I realized I hadn't thought about Ethan all day. That night, our phone call felt forced and empty. After we hung up, I sat there wondering when talking to my best friend had started to feel like a chore. I signed up for a pottery class the next week just because a coworker mentioned it. The studio smelled like wet clay, and my first bowl looked like a sad pancake. But for 2 hours, I wasn't thinking about Ethan at all. I kept going every week, and slowly I got better. I started hanging out at the weekend art market with friends from work, buying little paintings and jewelry. I didn't need things I picked because I liked them, not because they reminded me of Ethan. My apartment filled up with a life that was just mine. Every time I laughed at a joke Ethan hadn't heard or made plans without him, a small guilty feeling crept into my chest, like I was supposed to save my good moments for him. I'd spent my whole life being Ethan and Mia. Now I was just Mia. I didn't know if that was growth or loss or both. 3 months into long distance, my phone rang late on a Tuesday night. Ethan was crying so hard I could barely understand him. He said he felt stuck and invisible, like his life was on pause. He admitted he'd only taken his job to stay, close enough to visit me on weekends, not because he actually wanted it. He said he didn't know how to want things for himself anymore, because needing me had always felt like the only thing that mattered. I realized we'd both been making choices out of fear instead of desire. I'd taken my job partly to prove I could live without him. He'd taken his to stay near me. We were both so afraid of losing each other that we'd stopped building real lives. 6 months after graduation, we had the breakup conversation over video call. Ethan said, "Maybe we rushed into romance when we should have just stayed friends." I agreed, even though it broke something in my chest to say it out loud. We talked about how we'd jumped from best friends to a couple without learning how to be both, how we assumed our history let us skip steps. But it doesn't work that way. We agreed to take a real break, no contact. Not the fake kind where you still text every day. After we hung up, I cried until my face was swollen and my chest ached. Losing Ethan felt like losing part of myself. I'd spent more of my life with him than without him, and now I had to learn how to be a whole person on my own. At Thanksgiving, I found out Ethan was visiting his family too. I spent the whole weekend nervous, avoiding the window, dreading running into him. Sunday morning, I made coffee and looked outside, and there he was, sitting on his porch steps in a hoodie, staring at nothing. When our eyes met, he raised his hand in a small wave. I grabbed my jacket and went outside. We talked for 4 hours on his front steps, just like when we were kids. At first it was careful and awkward. Then he told me about starting therapy, and I relaxed. He said his therapist helped him see he'd been afraid to need anything for himself, because he'd always been the one taking care of me. I told him about my pottery class and the art market, and how scared I'd been that building a life without him meant I didn't love him. I admitted I'd pushed him away because I was terrified of becoming Claire, the person who made him give up his dreams. He pulled out his phone and showed me a job offer in my city, from a firm working on projects he actually cared about. He'd interviewed a month earlier without telling me, because he needed to know he was choosing it for himself. He was taking the job no matter what happened between us. Something shifted in my chest. For the first time since we were 5, Ethan had made a choice that was truly his own. We agreed to start over slowly when he moved to my city in January and dating like normal people. Instead of assuming 16 years of history, let us skip the steps. Our first real date was at a coffee shop near my apartment. He showed up with flowers, which felt so formal we both laughed. We kept slipping into best friend mode and catching ourselves. When he walked me home, he kissed me goodnight, and it felt nothing like that first scared kiss. This one felt steady and sure. The next 6 months were hard work. We had to learn to be a couple while staying two separate people. We fought about making time for each other versus our own friends. I had to fight the urge to fall back into our old habit of doing everything together. He had to learn to tell me when he needed space instead of disappearing for days. In April, we had a huge fight because I made plans with my pottery friends on a night he wanted to see me. He said I was choosing them over him. I said that kind of thinking was exactly what broke us the first time. We didn't speak for 3 days before he called to apologize, saying his therapist had helped him notice he was falling into old fears. Slowly, we found a better rhythm. Date nights, friend nights, and nights just for ourselves. When his company offered him a promotion that meant moving to California, he didn't tell me for 2 weeks. I found out by accident, when he left the offer letter on my counter. I was hurt he'd kept it quiet, but then I understood. He was trying to decide on his own, the way he should. Over takeout one night, he told me he'd gone back and forth for weeks. I told him honestly I'd be sad if he left, but that I wanted him to choose what was right for his career. This time, I meant it, not out of fear of becoming Claire, but because I truly wanted him to have the life he wanted, even without me in it. He looked at me a long time, then said he was turning it down, not because of me, but because he genuinely liked his current project and team. I believed him, and that felt huge. 2 years after that first kiss, we were back at the same rundown diner from our college Sundays. Ethan was nervous the whole meal, dropping his fork twice. I thought we were about to have another hard talk about the future. Instead, he reached across the table, took my hand, and said he'd spent 2 years learning to be his own person, and that becoming his own person made him want to be with me even more. He pulled out a ring and asked me to marry him. I said yes because I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't afraid that loving him meant losing myself, or that he'd resent me later. We had both grown into people who could stand on our own, which made choosing to stand together feel right. Planning the wedding was its own reality check. Sitting with the coordinator over the seating chart, I realized we needed separate tables for our separate friends. My pottery classmates who'd never met Ethan, his co-workers who barely knew me. We weren't those two scared kids who couldn't function apart anymore. We had our own hobbies, our own people, our own bad days that the other person didn't have to fix. When Ethan came home frustrated about work, I listened without trying to solve it. When I got a rejection from a gallery, he hugged me without taking it personally. We were choosing each other every day, not just defaulting to each other because we always had. On our wedding day, his sister Sophie gave a speech about watching us grow up. Next door, 16 years of friendship. Then 2 years of rebuilding everything we thought we knew about each other. She said she'd never seen two people work harder to be both independent and together. When Ethan and I danced later, his hand steady on my back, I thought about how close we'd come to losing each other completely, and how we'd had to break apart and become whole people, separately before we could finally be together the right way. We'd done it the hard way, the messy way, the way that almost broke us and made us stronger instead.